With no ado whatsoever, let's talk about overwhelm. My name's Asia, I'm a momentum coach, and I work with neurodivergent, ambitious, multi-passionate folks just like you to help them be more productive and do the things they want to do, even when they're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, anxious, and not sure how to proceed. So let's go ahead and get into it. So firstly, I just want to acknowledge and validate for all of us that for those of us who are neurodivergent in particular, overwhelm is a really common state for us to get into, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But you're not alone if you are currently overwhelmed or find that you experience overwhelm pretty regularly. I hope that some of these tips can help you today, and I also hope that we can learn from each other. So if there's anything I didn't mention that you find helps you, I would love for you to drop those in the comments so that we can all share and grow together. Okay, so let's talk first about what overwhelm is. And I'm really glad that I didn't get to filming this video last week because I just went on a little road trip and we listened to Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown, and there was some really good talk in there about overwhelm and stress and how we commonly use overwhelm as a word when we mean stress. Stress as a state of having a difficult time coping with the demands that are on our plate. And overwhelm is getting to a point of not being able to cope, shutting down. It's a sort of elevated stress where we feel that we can't function and that we're not really coping at all with the demands that are on our plate. So overwhelm is more of like an out of control kind of feeling. And one of the things that I want to put our attention to today is that overwhelm is a state of cognitive and emotional intensity. And as neurodivergent and sensitive folks, we already experience the world at a higher intensity. So it's no wonder, really, I think that we get to this overwhelm place more often. And so the way I like to think about overwhelm is it being a state of overstimulation. And that overstimulation is probably some combination of emotional, cognitive, sensory, getting us to a state of not being able to just deal, right? That overstimulation results in mental depletion, and so we can't move forward. So what I'm hoping to do today is just to share a few ideas of things that might help us to deal better when we are in that state of overwhelm. So let's go ahead and get into these 7 tips. So my first tip for dealing with overwhelm is really about knowing what overwhelm looks like for you and what are the signs that overwhelm is coming on. Certainly overwhelm can be a sudden experience, but I find that for a lot of us and a lot of the clients that I work with, overwhelm kind of creeps up on us. And so what are the signals for you that you can kind of take notice of? So one of the things that happens for me when I'm overwhelmed is forgetting to eat or not wanting to eat is a big one. And the other one is that I notice my spaces start getting messy, like messy in a way that indicates to me that like I just can't deal with the normal amount of tidying up. But also there might be physical sensations. Some folks experience a sort of rapid heartbeat feeling or tension through their body or in certain parts of their body. There might also be your self-talk, your mental dialogue might change. And so what are those things for you? So identifying what those states are, what those behaviors, what those tendencies tend to be for you can be a really helpful way to just see that overwhelm might be on its way, and maybe if you can catch it a little bit early, there's some things that you can do to slow down that progression, if not stop it altogether. So where are you feeling it in your body? What do you notice is going to shit? So that could be your communication, your tidiness, your physical space, your personal hygiene, things like that. What is your self-talk like? My second tip for dealing with overwhelm is pausing. And this is something you can incorporate into your day-to-day in general as a practice. It doesn't have to just be related to overwhelm. Pausing is just kind of what it sounds like. It's just taking a beat. Oftentimes, because we're in this overstimulated place, we're in this stressed, anxious place, we can't kind of settle down, and pausing is an intentional, it doesn't even have to be a whole minute, but we'll just call it a minute. It could be 3 minutes, could be 30 seconds, but it's an intentional beat where you're kind of taking a few deep breaths and just trying to really ask yourself, how am I feeling? Why am I feeling that way, if you can identify that? Is there something I can or want to do about that? And really it's about a little tiny reset so that you can move forward with intention and a little bit of grounding. So pausing can really just help us regain a little bit of clarity, a little bit of focus for how we want to move forward, and can be a really powerful way to disrupt the cycle, whether that's a thought cycle or a behavior cycle that we're in, and just allow us to redirect. And I want to say that it can also be super hard to pause when we are in that frantic go, go, go kind of operating space, because it can be really hard to switch gears and even give ourselves that permission to take a moment, to take a couple of deep breaths. But even just taking those deep breaths will be so helpful. So pausing is another really great way to help deal with overwhelm. All right, tip number 3 for dealing with overwhelm is one that we've probably heard a lot in different circumstances, and that's to break things down into smaller pieces. So sometimes if we're having a cognitive overwhelm because we have so many things to do, for example, we might be in a place of feeling like overwhelmed by the amount of things that we have to do, or by how involved those things might be, how big they might feel. And so breaking them down is a way for us to start to see some success, because we're actually identifying pieces that feel a little bit more doable with whatever state we're in, and also help create more clarity around what it is that we're trying to do. And breaking things down is so important, because when we have tasks that feel insurmountable, of course, we're going to feel stressed by that. We might get to a point of overwhelm, of feeling like all of the things that are on our list are just too big for us. Making your steps smaller is really crucial. I could do a whole video on this, and if that interests you, please drop a comment below. But making your tasks smaller can be a little bit of an art form. One of the examples I use a lot is like do the taxes. If it's on the list, it's probably not a one and done thing, right? Like do the taxes involves a lot of steps. It might be compiling receipts. It might be reaching out to the tax preparer. It might be collecting pay stubs. So all of those things are distinct, different tasks. And so doing the taxes is actually a project. It's not a task. So think about where you might be able to break some things down into smaller steps. And that leads me right into the 4th tip for dealing with overwhelm, which is to do anything at all and start anywhere. Okay, so y'all, I have been talking about this specific thing for so long, but it's still true, because we get ourselves hung up on, this kind of like binary thinking about like, well, I have to start perfectly, or I have to have this much time to work on this task in order for it to be worth my while. And when we do that, it's a kind of procrastination, it's a kind of perfectionism. If we can embrace and practice starting anywhere and doing anything at all, we will find that we can gain some momentum. We can start dissolving some of that overwhelm, and we can find that we're actually getting stuff done. So it's so helpful to just start, even when it's a tiny little step, even when it feels almost insignificant. If the alternative is to do nothing, how is that helping us? Ultimately, confidence and momentum are built through action. Doing anything at all is a way of building that momentum and taking action. Doing anything can look lots of different ways, and it really just depends on where you're at and how you're feeling. So it could be something that serves as a cue to start the task, start the project. It might not be doing the thing itself, but it might be a way to get you into the motion. So it might be making a cup of tea, because when I make a cup of tea, then I know I'm gonna go sit down at my desk and start my workday. Or it could be putting on a certain outfit. It might be a cue to be like, okay, when I'm wearing these things, this is the kind of activities that I do. Just like when we put on our pajamas at the end of the day, that can often be a cue to chill out, right? So when we talked about breaking things down, doing something even smaller. So maybe you can't get a whole workout in, you don't have time, or you don't have the energy. And instead of, like kind of beating yourself up about it, what's the small thing you can do? And this is where like the doing, even if it feels insignificant, is important. So can you do a few jumping jacks? Can you go for a 5-minute, 3-minute walk? Can you step outside? You might feel resistance because you might want to do the whole workout. And maybe that's the ideal, and maybe that's not possible right now. So what is a small version of the thing that you want to do. Ultimately, doing anything at all lowers the bar a bit. And when we are in the state of being overwhelmed, super stressed, lowering the bar is something we have to do. We have to do it in order to get out of this place of overwhelm and high stress. So sometimes this means we have to do less or do things less well than we might ordinarily aspire to. And so this is really just a way of getting started and creating and building that momentum so that you can keep moving forward. Plus, it allows us to build success in a small way, and that is not nothing. All right, tip number 5 for dealing with overwhelm is a favorite one for us ADHDers is setting timers. I know, everybody says set a timer. Hear me out. So the reason setting a timer is often talked about with ADHDers is because we don't have a good sense of time. So it helps us to stay on time, to make sure that we take breaks at regular intervals. In the case of overwhelm, I find that a timer can be a way to help us do that anything at all, right? So sometimes when I have to do something that I don't want to do or that I don't feel like I have capacity to do, I might set a timer for 5 minutes. And I might say, like, I can do basically anything for 5 minutes. But setting that timer and allowing yourself to stop when the timer goes off is a way of redeveloping some trust in yourself. It's a way of developing that sort of self-knowledge that you do have some capacity, that there are some things that you can handle. And so essentially it kind of gives you an out, but it still allows you to move forward. And I think when we're in the state of overwhelm too, having that 5-minute timer can also be a temperature check for us. How do we feel at the end of 5 minutes? Do we feel like, okay, I've generated a bit of momentum, I could keep going? Or do you feel exhausted? So using a timer can be a way of checking in with ourselves. 6th tip for dealing with overwhelm as an ADHDer is to externalize your thoughts. So often from my clients, I hear about how they're feeling overwhelmed or how they have all these thoughts and they feel kind of taken over by them. So I ask, where are you keeping that information? Where is that to-do list living? Where are all those thoughts landing? And, I get these kind of looks of like, oh, well, just in here. And I was like, you got to get those out, because getting them out doesn't necessarily solve anything, but it can really help to alleviate some of that brain swirl. And it can also help move you to action. So I just did this with a client the other day. They were feeling some overwhelm from things happening in various aspects of their life and not really sure how to move forward, not sure what actions to take next. So we took a few minutes to brain dump some of the things that were feeling concerning for them. But at the end of 5 minutes, they're like, okay, I see. Here are some things that I can do. Some of these I can do today, some I could do in the next few days. And so taking that stuff out of their head and putting it on paper was really helpful for them. And I found that for myself as well. I used to go to bed feeling very anxious about the things that had to happen the next day. And I found that one of the ways that helped me a lot was to write down just everything that was going through my mind before I got into bed. And it did help alleviate some of the anxiety and some of that overwhelm that I was feeling kind of on a chronic basis. You don't have to do a brain dump, but you can journal. It doesn't have to be structured. It could just be stream of consciousness. I sometimes journal in a sort of poetry form. It can also be using a voice recording, and you can keep that voice recording or just delete it. You can talk it out with someone you trust. But the way I think about it is when all that stuff's swirling in there, we don't have space for other stuff. And so if we can get some of that stuff out, it lessens that noise and that pressure that we might be feeling in our minds. And in so doing, hopefully we alleviated some of that overwhelm and we've been able to identify maybe some of these things have an action attached to it. And a lot of times just knowing that there's something that we can do can be such a powerful antidote to overwhelm. All right, and the last tip for dealing with overwhelm is to play. So play can look lots of different ways, and the way that I sometimes think about this is like play is anything that I enjoy that doesn't need to happen, right? There's no responsibility or obligation attached to it. There's no reason. It's not necessarily a productive thing. Kids do it so easily. So sometimes I really just see how kids play, and that can be really helpful just to inspire me. So play doesn't have to be an activity you do on your own. It can be something you do with friends. It could be something you do out in the world, so going to like trivia night or doing karaoke, watching an old movie that you love. It could be exploring a hobby. For so many of us, we're super curious, so it could be about learning something that you're curious about. If you're active, if you enjoy being active, going for a hike, getting out in nature, dancing, jump roping, doing movement that is different than the movement that you often do, doing something that is different than that can be really playful. These can be also little things like singing in the shower or having a one-song dance party. The point is, play helps us to reset our overwhelmed kind of state of mind. It can be a way of regulating our nervous system, partially because when we are in a state of play, our nervous system can sense that we are safe. When we are enjoying ourselves, that creates a sense of safety internally. It can be really helpful for dealing with overwhelm. It doesn't mean that overwhelm goes away, but it can mean that overwhelm lessens or gives us a reprieve from it briefly. Playing is really important. I'd love to hear how you play. I find that it can be a challenge, but it's just so important for us. It can be a way that we come back to ourselves as well. All right, friends. So what have we learned today about overwhelm? The 7 tips that we talked about for dealing with overwhelm are: 1, just getting to know your personal signs of overwhelm. 2, pausing. 3, breaking things down into smaller steps and actions. 4, starting anywhere, doing anything at all. 5, using a timer. 6, externalizing your thoughts, getting it out of your head. And 7, play. I'd love to know which of these you're curious to try. I'd really love to encourage you to try some of these out when they come in handy for you. How will you remember to use these things? When we're in an overwhelmed place, it can be really difficult to access some of this. So there might be something that you put on a sticky note, or if you keep a journal, then maybe it's on the inside cover of your journal, and maybe you just pick one of these things that you practice and incorporate. Some of these might be things that you can incorporate and practice at any point. They don't have to just be when you're in a state of overwhelm. All of these are things that you can do outside of overwhelm as well. Being in a state of overwhelm is so difficult, but because we find ourselves in that state kind of on a regular basis, we have to continue to explore different ways of managing overwhelm for ourselves. I will link below Brene Brown's blog post about stress versus overwhelm in case you're interested in that. It's not even a blog post, it's a list. It's very easy to go through. I hope that some of these tips can help you. And in the meantime, to all of you, remember to take good care of yourself, drink some water, and you can do the things. I'll see you next time.